Hey everyone, and welcome back to another King Arthur Legends Rise video. So in today's video, guys, we're going to be just having a discussion, a little bit of theory talk, because the other night I was thinking of what the next video I was going to make, what it was going to be on, and I was struggling a little bit because, in all honesty, content creation in this game is a little difficult, and that's for two reasons. The first reason is the game kind of puts out characters a little too slowly in this game. They started out with a good chunk of heroes to start the game, which is really good. However, since the release, I think they've only released like 6 new characters, and they've all been legendaries, which I do not like. I wish there was more rare and uncommon heroes that they would release so we can kind of mix and match and have some fun with some teams. But the problem that you also run into, even if you did release new rare and uncommon heroes, is the second reason why content creation is hard in this game, and that's because Morgan is way too good. Now, before anyone jumps down my throat, I don't want the developers to, nerf Morgan. I don't want that to happen. I also don't want them to stop giving Morgan away for free, because I think that's great for players to start out with such an amazing hero that you certainly need. I think the game gets way harder without this. And I don't think it's fair for newer players who were to come in to not have Morgan whenever, us legacy players started with her. That's not fair. But I think the developers kind of screwed themselves with this because, in all honesty, the only type of characters that you're kind of looking for at this point are going to be support heroes, people like Nika, who was a great addition to the game that made people want to go pull, and just an additional damage dealer. I think that's why Irrit has become so good, is because it's now a bit of a step up from Bedivere, mainly because of the other heroes that they've released that complement Irrit. You have heroes like Nika that give specific buffs to other serpent favor heroes, which is kind of why Irrit outclasses Bedivere at this point. So there's really no point for people to, build up other controller support heroes because no one else in the game covers so much surface area as Morgan. Now the game, as people have mentioned in a couple different videos, lacks additional content that they need. They've put out some stuff. They put out like Clan Wars. They've put out an additional dungeon, all of these things. But one of the issues, even with the new dungeon, is the new dungeon also requires Morgan, right? So there's no real like mixing and matching. If you take a look at these heroes, right? You'll see the same kind of heroes across the board. Morgan is always in there because she's so necessary for the damage amplification. But at the same time, there's no, because Morgan exists, there is no reason to look up other defense down heroes, other heroes that have increased damage taken. There's no point in doing it because Morgan was free and she does everything that you need along with 2 or 3 other things that she brings in her kit. Now, I know these are champagne problems, but the problem with this, not only from a content creation standpoint, is also the fact that any new content that they put out, it will feel stale because you don't have to really theorize or think about it. You just throw in Morgan, you throw in Nika, you throw in maybe a Sergius, if he's fast enough, and then you throw in an Irrit or a Bedivere. Nothing changes from that aspect. Even if you have maybe, say, a Bedivere or an Irrit that just has the Frost Relic and you don't have a fire damage dealer, maybe that's what you have to then think about. Okay, what's the best fire damage dealer that I can bring in now that I don't have, a positive kind of element here? But you're always bringing Morgan anyway. So maybe 25% of your creation needs to be developed at that point. And it just kind of got me thinking, what would this game look like if Morgan wasn't here? Because I think that's where things would get really interesting. And I preface that because I do want to talk about future content in this game going forward. So in the power-up dungeons, right? And this is something that some games I think do really well. A game like Summoner's War, right, which is the game that kickstarted all of these types of games since they came out. They've been out for 10 years. They celebrated their 10-year anniversary, and every single game has copied aspects of that game. Now, what Summoner's War does really, really well is they will give you all of the free kind of heroes or easy to obtain heroes to get through PvE content, which is great. I think that is amazing. But what Summoner's War has is some really fantastic PvP endgame content where, the sky is the limit for whoever you want to use. So you're using your resources to complete PvE, help with some of the equipment stuff, and then you just build individual characters that might be best suited for PvP. This game does not have that type of endgame content. So you're basically just trying to build up your characters for one or two things in PvP. And that's where the, creativity comes along. So for those power-up dungeons, I think this is one of the least needed areas for Morgan. In Plane of Beasts, you can certainly do things with, Tristan, Chris, with Kay, all of those people, multi-hitters or whatever. You don't even need like damage amplification at this point because Tristan hits so hard with heroes with protection. And that's kind of cool. Maybe if Morgan wasn't around, you would need more heroes that do additional damage with protection, like Tristan, because then you'd run into a similar problem. It's just like, oh, okay, they gave me Tristan. I don't need to use anybody else. I don't need to think outside the box in this area. But yeah, in this area or in this dungeon, maybe you just bring in a defense down character, which is why, Clarissan was in there. Or you just take a little bit longer to complete the dungeon, you bring a healer, you do a little more sustaining, and you just slowly chip away at the boss. Gorgos, same thing. You got a little DOT action there. You don't need them. Don't need Morgan. Frozen Plain, yesterday's video, I showed, this team, which is just DOT as well, and it gets the job done. So this is like an area that I think Morgan wouldn't be needed. Now, when it comes to Shrine of Storms, you don't need Morgan. Like, you can beat this dungeon with this team. But this is where things would get interesting. And it follows the same kind of play style for the additional dungeons where Morgan is just best in class, right? So let's say you need to bring a whole bunch of things for this boss, right? You need to bring attack gauge reduction. You need to bring attack gauge increase, which is like your Sergius, your Gillian. And then you have someone who's going to eventually kill the boss, because these heroes are all support. Now, let's say you didn't have Gillian, right? What would you do? You have to go and you have to find all of the attack gauge reduction heroes in the game and see what works best for you. Here, there's not many options. You have Ban, which would see a little bit more play. You'd see Clementine, which might be able to mix and match some things around because she also does damage and attack gauge reduction. But until Morgan, like if Morgan wasn't here, now we have the ability to increase damage amplification, reduce attack gauge, increase attack gauge, and then bring someone like Irrit, which is why when you look at the speed teams, it's insane. Because Morgan's damage amplification and attack gauge reduction is enough just for one turn, these players are bringing Frost heroes in just crazy amounts of damage output. It makes the whole dungeon a joke. Where if you didn't have Morgan here, you couldn't do this. You would really have to specialize your heroes to take down this dungeon. So same thing with like Nest of Yskelheg. Now, it seems like people have found a way to just counterattack, give people huge amounts of attack, and then hope to not miss if the boss has some kind of evasion up. This is pretty cool creativity. This I like. This dungeon, same thing. Morgan. This dungeon, same thing. It's attack gauge reduction with Morgan. Some of these people are doing the frost stuff. I'm not quite sure why. I don't know what kind of buff this hero puts on here. But they're just going for raw damage. So I guess the increased damage taken is like a really good thing here. If anyone has any understanding of why this is a thing, be my guest. But again, more Morgan. And the thing that I don't want to have happen is in future content, whenever a new piece of content comes out, you just throw in Morgan, you throw in Nika, you throw in Anya, and you throw in Bedivere. Like, it's the same stuff all the time. So they have two areas here that it looks like they can put in additional portals, right? Right over here, and then there's another one right over here. What I was hoping they were going to do with the Forbidden Dungeon Hard was you'd be able to use normal characters, right, throughout normal Dungeon Hard. And then they would have kind of like additional areas where it had unique criteria, similar to this one. But it would just be like only Steed and Crow, heroes. Or only rare serpent heroes and yada, yada, yada. Or one legendary serpent hero and so on. Because, like I said, without that, you're literally just using X team, where Morgan is always there. It's either Bedivere or Irid. Anya, if you can do enough damage. If not, you're using like a Gillian or a Sergius, and you're just making sure that other team never goes, or you kill the team fast enough where they never go, right? So for that future content, I think they really need to be creative, which is like only rares, only uncommons, legendaries from X faction. Because if not, I think they're going to fall into the same issue, which is why content seems stale. I truly believe that's why content seems stale, is because it doesn't matter what kind of content that they put out. You will always be using the same characters. You can literally use these three characters in every single area, but the common denominator is Morgan. Without Morgan, you wouldn't be able to run Anya. I guess in this dungeon, that's a bad example because Anya is your key damage dealer. But here, you wouldn't be able to run, 2 damage dealers. That would not be a thing. You wouldn't be able to kill that boss fast enough because no one else brings damage dealt increase and defense down on the same hero. So you'd have to fill multiple roles. The game would be more difficult. And it would take a lot more creativity. So that's all I got, guys. I know it was kind of a rant, but it just truly made me think, like, man, how much more interesting would this game be if Morgan wasn't here, right? Because you want it to be fresh and exciting, try and get these new challenges. But if you have one hero that is able to do everything, it kind of makes it stale. So unless they can remove the ability to use her at all different areas, I think any kind of new content will be stale. But yeah, I hope people don't take this the wrong way. It's just meant to be a fun video. I don't want Morgan to go anywhere, anything like that. I just thought the game would be way more different without her, and I wanted to see if you guys ever thought the same thing. So that's all I got for you. But I appreciate you watching. Have a great weekend, and I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.